Hi, I'm Ted Pattison from Critical Path Training. In this session, we're going to look at the new advancements in the SharePoint user interface and what we call the Fluent User Interface or the Fluent User Experience. Now, looking back at SharePoint 2007, there's commands all over the user interface, whether it's the welcome menu, the site actions menu. If you go to a particular list, well, we have the actions menu, ECB menus, and so commands are everywhere, and users basically have a hard time using their intuition to figure out where to go. Likewise, with navigation, well, page reloads are happening all the time to do the simplest things. For example, let's say that I have a list and I go to list settings and I want to add a new column to a particular list. Well, there's a postback just to get to the page where I can add the new column. I decide that I don't want a single line of text, but I want a choice. I go ahead and change the radio button, once again postback, and I go down to start editing some aspects of that particular column, and I just have postback, postback, postback. Now, what we want to do is get rid of all these different elements that cause these postbacks. Now, also, look at web parts and the way that we interact with web parts. Web parts have links at the bottom that provide one command, but a web part can't provide two commands at the bottom. So one of the things that was a big goal in the redesign of SharePoint 2010 was to come up with a much better experience for executing commands, for navigating, and for basic page editing. Now, page editing was difficult. How do you edit a page in SharePoint 2007? Well, typically it required that the user knew to put a content editor web part on the page and how to get into the rich editing view or the source code of the editor web part. Well, now we have a user interface where someone can just go into edit mode, jump right into the page, and start just typing text or including pictures or what have you. Now, we also have the server-side ribbon. So the server-side ribbon tries to create a consistent command execution paradigm as far as it's consistent with Office applications. So if users have been using Word 2007, Excel 2007, they've already become accustomed to the ribbon. But also, throughout the SharePoint environment, we want it consistent. So when a user needs a command, they're always reaching up to the top of the screen where the ribbon lived. So we want it to be consistent and familiar, and we just want a streamlined experience. Now, as you start building controls for the ribbon, if you're familiar with creating ribbons in the client Office applications, we have many of the same controls, the button, the split button menu, drop downs, check boxes, toggle boxes, labels, all these different controls. The one that we don't have on the server that hopefully you didn't get too attached to over in the Office client is the gallery control. So that doesn't exist. Also, there's a status bar notification area, and these are the places that now page authors and SharePoint developers should be writing their status notifications to. Now, what we'll see is that there's some things in the server-side object model, but also in particular, there's new places where we write JavaScript that allows us to write into these areas without having to post back to a page. The other thing that we see is that there is a new dialogue framework. So when it's time for me to interact with the user, instead of forcing a post back, it's going to be more consistent with the new user interface paradigm if we invoke a dialogue that comes up as a modal dialogue. And in the demo I'm about to show you, I'll get you started. But basically, there is going to be some client-side JavaScript APIs that SharePoint provides, and I have to know enough, how to call that to bring up this dialogue and to gray out the background so it acts much like a modal dialogue that they're used to in a desktop application. Now, also, we see that there's in-place editing, which is triggered by this modal dialogue invocation. So someone's going to click on New Item. It's going to bring up one of these modal dialogue boxes, which is basically just a new form. And then what we need to do is somehow orchestrate having the user change what's on the form, click OK, and take that with JavaScript and basically write it back into the page. Okay, there's also multi-level targeting. You know, one of the big goals of SharePoint 2010's user interface is to make things easier. In SharePoint 2007, when you're seeing a bunch of items, 10 items, what if you want to delete items 3 and 7 and 10? Typically, we have to go to the All Items view and use the ECB menu and delete them one at a time. Once again, with postback, postback, postback. And with the new Fluent user interface, it's going to be much easier. Okay, to basically run bulk operations. Okay, now let's go ahead and move over to a demo where I'll show you how to create a very simple modal dialog box with client-side JavaScript code. Now, I'm going to show you something that's fairly simple. I have a project created with the SharePoint tools which has a single application page inside of it. Now, let's go ahead and open up this application page, appPage1.aspx. Inside this page, well, the first thing we've done is we've gone to the placeholder, which is named placeholder additional page head, and that's what allows me to write into the head element if I have to put in some CSS styles, or in this case, we're going to put some JavaScript up inside the page. And also, we have a single input control, which is a button. Now, what the page is going to look like is this. We simply have a button, and what we want to be able to do is click on the button. So when we click the button and we say Open Dialog, it's going to run this function right here. Now, as you'll see, sp.ui, these are JavaScript methods that are made available by JavaScript that's behind the standard master page. And so create dialog options is one of these functions. And so when I create the dialog options, well, I'm going to assign the URL of the dialog that I want to bring back. So just keeping this very, very simple, I have my dialog.htm. I think you can see that this is a doc type of HTML 4.0, and I don't have very much inside the dialog. But what we'll do is we'll set the URL, the width, the height, and also what we have right here is dialog return value callback. So there is, when I bring up the dialog and someone dismisses the dialog, we can point to a JavaScript function that's automatically going to be called. And I'm just going to go ahead and put an alert behind it so you can see it happened. And then we're going to call sp.ui modal dialog show modal dialog, and we'll pass the options right here. And the functionality we're going to get when we do that is basically to bring up this dialog, and you could see that the JavaScript APIs automatically take the page behind and they gray it out, they make it so it's disabled. And so inside your dialog, well, you can do whatever you want here as far as creating different controls, possibly having code that goes and talks to the server. You could have a Silverlight application here. But as users interact with your dialog, they're probably going to click OK or cancel. And when they do, and they dismiss the dialog, you can see my code clicked in right here. So what you're going to need to do is, once again, writing client-side JavaScript code, scrape the dialog to see whatever type of values that the user put in to determine whether the user clicked OK versus cancel versus save versus rollback, whatever you have inside your dialog. And you're probably going to need to take values from that dialog and possibly push them into the form, or possibly interact with the server through some type of asynchronous JavaScript callback mechanism.